Saturday, June 1st. Welcome to another episode of Stand Tall. We're going to do a quick one. I'm excited to dive into the art of war. So we're now on to part 3 in Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Part 3 is titled, How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. Chapter 1 is, You Can't Win an Argument. And after various metaphors and stories and tales of showing this, the first principle at the end of the chapter comes out to be the only way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it. Now, despite what the psychologists say about in today's day and age, what this means to me is like not for your significant other or those around you, right? Like your army or your military, but maybe like the opposing army, the opposing military, right? If we're going to dive into Sun Tzu here in a second and see how these two relate. And so this is going to be for those instances of like the people you don't know or the enemy, right? The people who don't matter in your life. You don't need to pay them any attention. Or if you do, then you know the best thing to do is to avoid conflict, because whenever you let these people into your life, if you do have to have them close to you, then is to avoid that conflict because your time is already precious. So let's go over and dive into the art of war, see where the bookmarks left us off. Looks like we're in the chapter, the 9 situations. We're going to start with verse 7. When an army has penetrated into the heart of a hostile country, leaving a number of fortified cities in its rear, it is serious ground. So this is when it's like actually time to get serious ground. 8. Mountain forest, rugged steeps, marshes, and fens, all country that is hard to traverse. This is difficult ground. And then 9. Ground which is reached through narrow gorges and from which can only retire by tortuous paths, so that a small number of the enemy would suffice to crush a large body of our men. This is hemmed-in ground. Next, we're going to jump over to an alternate translation of Sun Tzu with a couple of reflections from some other military strategists at the time. So Master Sun says, when you enter deeply into others' land, past many cities and towns, this is called heavy ground. Cao reflects on this, that this is ground from which it is hard to return. Once you're in there, once you're in the thick of battle, you're behind enemy lines, as it were, you're not turning around, right? You're seeing this battle through, unless you absolutely have to retreat, at which point it's probably going to be hard because you're behind those cities, right? You're going to have to retreat through more. Okay. Master Sun says, when you traverse mountain forests, steep defiles, marshes, or any route difficult to travel, this is called bad ground. Ho Yongqi says, bad ground is land that lacks stability and is unsuitable for building fortifications and trenches. It is best to leave such terrain as quickly as possible. This is just like Carnegie's teaching and the principle for part 3. The best way to win an argument is to avoid it, right? So bad ground is land that lacks stability and is unsuitable for building fortifications and trenches. Okay? An argument is bad ground to develop any relationship, right? Or build upon an existing relationship. And so as we approach arguments, maybe it is someone we want to impress. Maybe it is a potential ally. The point is to suppress the emotion, to avoid this bad ground, right? Of this bad breeding ground of negative emotion. Master Sun says, when the way in is narrow and the way out is circuitous, so a small enemy force can strike you, even though your numbers are greater, this is called surrounded ground. Mei Yaochen says, if you are capable of extraordinary adaptation, you can travel this ground. I love that. I'm going to mark that. Because, that just goes to prove, like, adaptation conquers quite a bit. If you are capable of extraordinary adaptation, you can travel this ground. You can be surrounded. You can be losing the battle. You can be losing the war. It can look dire. But if you're adaptable, extraordinarily, you're going to win. Or you can find your way out, at least to strategically retreat. Zhang Yu says, on ground that is hemmed in front and walled off behind, a single defender can hold off 1,000 men. On such ground, you win by ambush. And so we've seen this And I know that I've said this before, whether to this reflection or to one similar, but that is basically the movie 300, right? And the Spartans and the strategic choosing of the location in order to defend against the advancing armies. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward. An argument, right? A discussion, whatever kind of talk or friendship or relationship we're developing, these are all nine situations, right? The nine grounds. And so let's kind of think of those as we move forward, and then remember one principle to enact today: try to avoid those arguments.